Good morning and welcome to the 23rd annual exhibit of hydrogen and fuel cell technologies and batteries. We've been here since 1995 discussing the innovations, the developments on a national level, internationally, and also in terms of technology. We'll be doing a little bit of all of these things because we'll be addressing the situation in France today and in the future. I'll be talking to Philippe Boucly, who's president of the French Association for Hydrogen and Fuel Cells. Please welcome with me Philippe Boucly. Good morning.
Good morning to everybody.
So, we of course need an introduction to the French Association for Hydrogen and Fuel Cells. Perhaps we could start with that.
Yes, I'm president of AFHYPAC. AFHYPAC is a French association for hydrogen and fuel cells. We have roughly 100 members. More than 15 big groups from the energy sector, but also from the mobility sector, and more than 50 small and medium enterprises. Our members are also communities. Half of the regions of France, in France there are 13 regions, half of them are members of our association. We have develop a vision. You know that the French government is presently preparing a national plan for developing hydrogen in France. And to contribute to this plan, we have developed a vision with 11 big groups. They are here on the slide. 4 from the energy sector, ENGIE, EDF, Air Liquide and Total, and 7 from the mobility sector. You can see them, Hyundai, Toyota, suppliers of the automotive industry, Faurecia, Michelin, Plastic Omnium, and also the French railways, SNCF, and Alstom, who developed recently a train with hydrogen. Our vision is that hydrogen could play a major role in the future in the economy, contributing to almost 20% of the final demand, 20% of the final demand by 2050, roughly 220 terawatt-hour, which in other terms is 5.5 million tons. Compared to today, production is 6 times the present production of hydrogen in France. The role of hydrogen is dual, I would say. On one side is contributing to integrate renewable in the energy system, and also to contribute to decarbonize end users like buildings, transportation, industry, and also to provide renewable feedstock to industry. Of course, this vision will not happen easily. We consider that we should start now, and we should scale up our development right now. For that, a framework is needed, a framework which would be fair, stable, and incentive. Fair means that one has usually the idea that some energies are fostered. And fair would be to adopt a neutral approach to all energies, and especially for hydrogen. Stable means that our vision should be shared by all authorities at the government level, but also at the regional level, in order not to change their mind during years. And incentive, because we have to admit that our technologies are mature but still expensive. So to cross Death Valley, we need some support, financial support, but also some regulations. Regulation should be simplified. Some For instance, we are asking for some new amortization rules for vehicles in order to foster the development of hydrogen vehicles. These technologies are already ready to be developed at scale, but of course not all at the same moment. For instance, in the transportation area, forklifts are already developed in Northern America, but also in Germany or in France. City buses, it starts in some cities in Europe, for instance in Cologne, in Köln, in Hamburg, and also in France, in some cities, in Pau, in south of France. For industry and some figures, not by 2050 but earlier, we consider that doing that we could have roughly 10,000 cars or vehicles with hydrogen by 2023 and roughly 200,000 vehicles by 2028. And corresponding figures for refueling station, 140 by 2023 and 400 by 2028. For industry, on the long term, it could contribute to roughly to 10% of the needs of industry, basically for providing high-grade heat, developing high-temperature electrolysis. As we refer to feedstock, it could be used for producing steel, roughly 10% of the French production, or for producing chemicals, roughly 2 million tons of chemicals by 2050. Concerning heating, it could deliver 1 to 2 terawatt-hour energy to the buildings by 2030. There are a lot of figures, but you can find everything in the brochure, which are on the table and which are also on the website. It's okay. So, as a conclusion, what we are telling is that, again, it could contribute to 20% of the final energy demand. It could reduce the emission of France by 55 million tons of CO2, which correspond to roughly to 1/3 of the gap between the business as usual trend and the Paris Agreement level. This difference is roughly 155 million tons, and doing that, we do more than 1/3 of the gap. What we have also demonstrated and we are advocating for is that developing hydrogen technologies is a big industrial challenge, and it could bring a benefit to the French economy. It would represent 40 billion euro by 2050, and among that, roughly 15 billion euro export. It would create 150,000 jobs and reduce pollution, azote, nitrogen dioxide, and carbon monoxide. But again, for that, we need this framework, which would be fair, stable, and incentive. So that's our vision for what we have presented recently in Paris, and which is presented in this brochure on the tables.
I'd like to remind the public that the brochure is full of information. Rarely do we have such an expert in a field, someone who understands the national policy and the potential for exports as well of a developing industry. The conversation should continue at booth C51, which is over there. Philippe Boucly will be there to answer further questions. We're pressed for time here. There's just so much more to say, isn't there? So please continue the conversation at the booth. I've been talking to Philippe Boucly, who's president of the French Association for Hydrogen and Fuel Cells. It's been a pleasure having you here, and we hope to see you back next year.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all. We'll be returning almost immediately, so stay seated. The drinks are on the house. Coffee and other beverages are served free of charge. We'll be talking to Johannes Daum, who's head of the Program of Mobility and Fuel Strategy at NOV GmbH. Stay tuned. We'll be back in one moment.